there guys, welcome back to another awesome video, and today's movie review is going to be of X2. So X2 is the sequel to the 2000s X-Men movie. This time around, after an attack on the President of the United States, both humankind and mutantkind start to slowly go to war with one another, and with the threat of William Stryker planning to wage war as well. So this movie is once again directed by Bryan Singer. He did the first movie, he comes back to do the sequels, and something I think that's very interesting and little known fact is the screenplay was also done by Michael Dougherty. So yes, the guy who did Trick or Treat and is doing the legendary Godzilla franchise, I had a hand in doing some of the X-Men movies, which I think is kind of fitting and kind of makes sense and it's kind of cool. Michael Dougherty has worked with some of these Marvel actors, mainly some of these X-Men cast members before in several projects like Brian Cox and Anna Paquin and a few others to name. And I think Bryan Singer did the screenplay or produced Trick or Treat with Michael Dougherty, so I think it's kind of cool. I think it's kind of neat that they all kind of work in the same circle together in the same projects. Like, I just think that's kind of interesting. But that aside, I'm just going to say it right out the bat and right out the gate. People may agree with me on this or may not agree with me on this. I feel like some people will and some people won't. But I really like X2, X-Men United, a lot more than the first movie. Don't get me wrong, I like the first film, but to me, in my opinion, I just think X2 is my favorite sequel. It's one of my favorite sequels within the X-Men movies. It's my overall one of my favorite movie sequels. I think it's just better than the first on so many levels and so many reasons. And one of those things that I appreciate and kind of respect with X2, or at least with the X-Men movies, is that it kind of has a smaller scale or smaller impact of a story. This was when, we're talking the early 2000s, this was way before the MCU, way before things like crossovers and post-credit scenes and all that other stuff. And I really do respect looking back on these movies. I appreciate something like X2 a lot more now, looking at it and noticing it as I've gotten older, and I kind of have that appreciation for at least the first two X-Men movies. I don't know about X-Men Last Stand, but I at least have that appreciation for X-Men and X2 right here. Don't get me wrong, I love the MCU, I love what it has established, but looking back on this sort of world and this sort of era and this sort of time when there wasn't an MCU, there wasn't the multiverse or anything like that within the Marvel universe. There was just this story within this compacted universe, the X-Men universe, and it did a good job establishing itself and establishing its ground. The first two really did an excellent job of that, and I feel X2 definitely furthers that and expands upon it. And although this is an X-Men movie and the ensemble, everyone else does a great job, everyone is great, everyone's fantastic, everyone gives it their all, everyone gives it 100% in this film, this is definitely leaning more towards, this is definitely Wolverine's movie. This is definitely Hugh Jackman's film in several aspects, because the first aspect is that the majority of the beginning of the movie, the X-Men remaining members of the team, like Charles Xavier, Cyclops, Jean Grey, everyone's kind of doing their own thing and kind of scattered a little bit, and we're kind of more focusing on Wolverine watching over the kids, watching over the students, watching over the Institute while they're gone. So there's a big chunk of Wolverine kind of being like a mentor, being a teacher to kind of everyone in a small chunk of the film, and we then go further into more scenes of him finding out who he is and finding out the Weapon X program and finding out who William Stryker is and why does this guy William Stryker know so much about him. And which, by the way, William Stryker, Brian Cox, is very fascinating in this film. He's very terrifying, but he's also fascinating in a way with how he oversees and overlooks the world. And it's terrifying because he goes to the point where his plan is to eliminate all mutant kind using Charles Xavier's Cerebro. So that metal helmet that he uses to oversee humanity and oversee the world and maybe perhaps oversee the multiverse. I feel like something like Cerebro would be able to reach other Earths. I'm just saying. But anyways, he uses Charles Xavier to try and do so. And by doing so, he uses his son, who even had this mutant gene in his body, and uses him as a weapon. Like, he's that terrifying. He's that, like, just cruel of a monster of a human, kind of the worst sides of humanity. That kind of, fortunately or unfortunately, helps Magneto's argument about humanity and us, how we are as monsters and how cruel we can be and how just neglective and how just very much harsh we can be about people that we may not like or for whatever reason dislike, or we can just dislike you just by the looks of you. Like, it kind of proves his point in a way, which is kind of scary. But still, back to Brian Cox. He's just a terrifying dude, and he's also just interesting to watch. There's something about actors like Brian Cox, Sir Patrick Stewart, and of course Ian McKellen have just such great presence in these films and just in overall their movies that they do in general. Back to Wolverine, this is Hugh Jackman at his prime, but I feel like at the same time, no matter what movie Hugh Jackman has done as Wolverine, he is in his prime. Something like this movie to even something like in Logan, his Wolverine is at his prime. He just gives it so much raw frustration and raw just energy, and it's just so perfect, and it's gonna be very, looking back, I know we are where we are within Marvel and within movies. Looking back at this movie, it's very gonna be hard to not see Hugh Jackman as Wolverine as much. Like, yes, granted, we're gonna see him in Deadpool 3, but it's gonna be just still hard to top. He's just that good, and he's just that perfect as this character. I love the flashbacks we get of Project Weapon X and the whole thing with Wolverine. It's very vague, and I know they later on delve into it with X-Men Origins Wolverine, but if we were in 2003, let's say hypothetically we traveled back in time to 2003 to see these flashbacks, is just very intriguing. It's just very vague. Like, you don't know very much of what happened, and even with what Stryker had said at the end of the movie, that perhaps Wolverine volunteered for this program and for this procedure.
You cut me open. You took my life. You make it sound as if I stole something from you. As I recall, it was you who volunteered for the procedure.
That could be easily the truth, or that could be easily Stryker manipulating him. Even though by X-Men Origins Wolverine, he kind of does volunteer, but still, it's just implemented that maybe that was the truth. Maybe he was lying. Like I said, everyone's fantastic, and everyone has a few highlight moments. Even Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler. Of course, Ian McKellen is fantastic as Magneto, and you just gotta love Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier. I also love the subtlety of having Lady Deathstrike as one of the foes we see in this film. I like seeing that we're furthering the chemistry with Bobby and Rogue. I kind of like that we're going with this arc for Pyro, who winds up joining Magneto and Mystique on their evolution. I know probably in the past, when this movie came out, or at least when this franchise started out, people were not big fans of the costumes and the outfits and that they don't look comic book accurate. I know they aren't comic book accurate, but I feel like the costumes in this franchise have kind of become a staplement of this franchise. Like, I know it's very early 2000s, the whole edgy black attire, kind of like aesthetic, leather, whatever they were trying to go for, something 2000s related. But there's something about this franchise being known for these outfits, and it kind of works for them a little bit. And I've said this before, I'll say it again, I don't really have a problem with comic inaccuracy at this point, because it just depends on if it looks good or not, or if it's done well or not, and that's just how I roll at this point. Just real quick with the ending, I feel like as if Bryan Singer either did this on purpose, like he intended on doing this, or he did this unintentionally. But even if he did this intentionally or unintentionally, there still feels like there's a lot of stakes going on in this film. Not that I'm saying no other superhero film doesn't have stakes, but I feel like there's a majority of scenes, there's a lot at stake here. And I really love the morals that are kind of presented in this film. A little bit more on the first one, but I just love this particular scene here with Storm and Nightcrawler. It's very brief, but I think like a moral like this is very strong.
So beautiful should not be so angry.
Sometimes anger can help you survive.
So can faith.
Something like that is great, and I think it's underappreciated, and I feel like this movie no matter where you want to look at it, within the Marvel MCU multiverse, outside of it, within the X-Men franchise, however you want to see it, I feel this is a movie that is very underappreciated. So, what else can I say? But I'm going to give X2, X-Men United, an A. I feel there might be a scene or two that might not be as good as I remember, but I think this is still a fantastic film overall, and generally outside the MCU, this is one of my favorite Marvel movies. So X2, have you guys seen it? What did you think of it? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please smash the like button. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. I do awesome videos every day for a week. Make sure you ring that bell to new videos every day for a week. Share the video with your friends, all that good stuff and more. Leave any suggestions in the comments. You name it, I'll look to do as best as possible. Since we're still in the theme of March Marvel Madness, if you guys have any Marvel suggestions for me, leave those in the comment section down below as well. Could be a movie, could be a TV show, could be a comic, maybe a video game. We'll see. Whatever the time we have for it, we'll get to it. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.